Hey, Brian from SnakeBytes here. I've said it for a long time. I think blue tongue skinks are the future of reptile keeping, certainly in America. So down here in Australia, this show is going to be all about blue tongue skinks. You're watching SnakeBytes. There's over 300 species of skinks in Australia, and this little guy here is called a pink tongue skink. And unlike the bigger version of the blue tongue skink, these guys only max out at about 17 inches, but they're still live bearers, having up to 25 babies. They're gonna feed on things like snails and little insects, and they're actually an arboreal lizard as well. So we found this guy on this tree right here. We're gonna go ahead and let him go and see what he does. What a cute little bugger, huh? Which country do blue tongue skinks not occur in? A, the Philippines, B, Indonesia, C, New Guinea. Go ahead and answer down below in the comments and check back later in the show to see if you have the right answer. For this week's Reptile Report, we'll be highlighting leopard geckos. Go ahead and check out the URL down below or click on the link in the description. I've been saying for quite some time that blue tongue skinks and their mutations may be the real next push in herpetoculture just because they're so amazing, and now there's some beautiful paint jobs out there. My first trip to Oz, I saw my first hypermelanistic or black blue tongue skink. Now there's albinos, and Joe Ball's been doing some amazing things crossing these together. Now he's actually bred the hypermelanistic to albino and has double hets now. Now this animal here happens to be gravid, and he hopes that a double het hypermelanistic amelanistic may be the father. So down the road we may actually see pretty much almost a white blue tongue skink. It's going to be truly awesome. Now what I find interesting about the hypermelanistic or black blue tongue skinks is the fact that it's actually a super version of a codominant mutation, or basically a visual heterozygous. Now this happens to be one of those visual hets or codom animals, and basically all it is much darker than a normal blue tongue skink, about 2 shades darker. When you breed 2 of these together, bam, you produce the black one. That's one awesome animal. Take a look at this gorgeous animal here. This is a melanistic eastern blue tongue skink, or Talinqua skinkoides. And the reason I think that the blue tongue skinks have such a huge future in reptile keeping is really twofold. Number one, you can tell how placid they are. And number two, they're extremely easy to keep. Now, blue tongue skinks are starting to come in some great paint jobs as well. But when it comes to husbandry, they're really simple. They typically just need a temperature of about 82 degrees with a hot spot of maybe 89 to 90 degrees. And in the wild, they're going to eat snails and vegetation. But in captivity, believe it or not, they're going to eat dog and cat food. Now, they're live bearers, having up to 12 to 15 babies, with some monster clutches being 25 babies, believe it or not. But I tell you what, I just can't wait to see what the future holds for these beautiful animals. Now, when it comes to melanistics, it's actually a recessive mutation, but the hets, believe it or not, will be visual hets. So when you breed them out, you can see the animals expressing some of the melanin. Bred back together, 1 in 4 are going to be these jet black animals with blue tongues. This was the exact animal that really made me start to get passionate about blue tongue skinks. Okay guys, I've got a treat here right now. This guy's name is Killer, and as you can see, he's a real demon, right? Not at all. It's beautifully tame. It's actually a northern blue tongue skink, or an intermedia. Now they're typically going to get larger than the eastern version, and unfortunately they're much more aggressive when it comes to feeding and housing them together. If you put 2 intermediate together and don't keep a close eye on them, you're going to be in trouble for sure. Other than that, they're very similar as far as the care and husbandry as the easterns, but as you can see, they're really beautiful. Again, probably because of the area they're from, the camouflage. They're from the more red sand area, so of course they have that beautiful pattern to them. Other than that, they're just like the easterns, truly breathtaking animals. Here's another example of the polymorphism of color within the northern blue tongue skinks. These guys are from Queensland, are much more silvery, but one of the things that you always see with the intermedia is the lack of the temporal stripe that the easterns have.
Now this is a beautiful example of a blue tongue skink. These are what they call blotch blue tongues, and they're most southern of the blue tongue skinks, ranging all the way into Tasmania. Now the size on these guys are more typical to the easterns and certainly a lot smaller than the northerns, but their litter sizes are smaller as well, typically 10 to 12. But one of the things that's great about all blue tongue skinks is their longevity in captivity. Believe it or not, easily going into 20 years, with some records being 30 to 37 years in captivity. Now that's pretty cool. And of course, they all have their namesake, which is that bright blue tongue, which is of course a threat mechanism to aggressive predators. I tell you, out of all the blue tongue skinks, the naturally occurring color phases, the blotch is probably my favorite. Now this is one amazing animal here. They call them Hypo northern blue tongue skinks. Again, these are an intermedia, but what's interesting about these guys is that they seem to range in a specific locality. Now sometimes you'll see a mutation that ranges into a locality and the entire population tends to be that mutation. So it's going to be interesting to see if this hypo is actually recessive or codominant, or if it's a locality polygenic trait. Regardless, this is one amazing animal. So this isn't technically a blue tongue skink, but certainly a very close cousin. It's a shingleback skink. Now these are endemic to west of the Great Divide and like it much more arid. They don't do well in humidity at all, but there's some things about these guys that are really spectacular, not to mention they're beautiful creatures on their own right. But I find it really interesting that they have all this fat storage in the back where they almost look like they have two heads. Again, that's a natural way to avoid predation. Now what's also interesting about these guys is, believe it or not, they're the most romantic of the lizard species. They find a mate and they mate for life. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And they have really small litters, only 2 to 4 babies. I tell you what, although they might not be a blue tongue skink, they certainly are just as cool, if not cooler. There's certainly a ton of cool skinks in Australia that aren't blue tongue skinks, like these Cunningham skinks right here of the genus Agurnia. What makes these so interesting is their intelligence. Believe it or not, they live in social groups and will actually pair bond. They also live in the outcrops of sandstone, and these little spiky things all over them help them crawl into crevices, blow up, and you cannot get them out. It's a great defense mechanism. What's also interesting with their intelligence, there's been studies where if 2 Cunningham skinks go up to each other and lick each other twice, it means they know each other. If they lick each other 4 times, it means it's a stranger. That's some pretty incredible behavior from a lizard. Here's 2 more Agurnia that may look just alike but are actually quite different animals. This is a Gidgee skink and this is a husbandry. Now the husbandry range from Queensland all the way up into the Northern Territory. They're going to primarily live in rock outcroppings and only have about 3 babies, but much like the Cunningham, both of these species are going to live in social group. Now the Gidgee skinks will range all the way from the west part of New South Wales all the way over to WA. They're going to live in the woodlands, the bush, and the rocky outcrops. They'll have about 8 babies, which is quite a bit more than the husbandry, but you can see they both have those telltale spiky tails. Again, that's used for predation when they climb into the crevices, blow themselves up, and they're almost impossible to get out. And I can tell you with handling them, they're pretty prickly as well, but they're super cool animals. Well, I hope you guys have found a new fondness for these amazing animals that I love so dearly. There's no doubt that a big part of the BHB future has to be breeding blue tongue skinks.
Which country do blue tongue skinks not occur in? If you said A, the Philippines, you're 100% correct. Good job.
So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Blue tongue skinks are amazing animals, and I have no doubt they're going to be on the rise here in America. As always, I was tweeting and Facebooking my way through it, so make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Till next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.